Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and welcome to the University of Minnesota Law School's Go Further webinar, Talking Sports Law with Hakeem Onafowokan. Today's event is co-sponsored by Minnesota Law's Office of Admission and the Career Center. My name is Hallie Prest, and I'm a graduate of the class of 2012 and a career counselor in the Career Center. And one of the best things about my work as a career counselor for my alma mater is having a courtside view of the many amazing, impactful things our students and alums do with their law degrees. So with that, I am very excited to introduce today's panelists. Hakeem Onafowokan is a 2015 grad of the law school and is currently serving as corporate counsel for NASCAR in its Daytona Beach, Florida headquarters. Seeking to combine his love of sports and his desire to work in the legal field, Hakeem went to law school immediately after earning a Bachelor of Science degree in sports management at the University of Minnesota. He interned in NASCAR's Public and Government Affairs Department after his second year at Minnesota Law and was a law clerk in the company's legal department after his third year. He joined NASCAR in his current corporate counsel role in 2018, where he drafts and assists with contracts and agreements on behalf of the organization. Taryn Sharma is a second-year law student and current vice president of the Student Sports Law Association. Taryn also contributes to the sports law podcast, Conduct Detrimental. We will drop a link to the podcast series in the chat function here for those who want to follow the podcast. Before law school, Taryn worked in analytics and operations for two Major League Baseball teams, the San Francisco Giants and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Taryn will be asking Hakeem a variety of questions today, focusing on his career, Minnesota law experience, and how he's stayed connected as an alum. Before I turn it over to our panelists, a few quick Zoom housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be shared via email to all registrants following the event. We have live audio captioning enabled. Please click on the live transcript feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to view or hide these captions throughout today's discussion. We'll reserve time at the end for our panel to address questions submitted via the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to input your questions there, and I will address the panel with the questions we receive at the end of the conversation. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Taryn and Hakeem.
Thank you so much, Hallie. Hakeem, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with the Minnesota law community today. I know that we've had an opportunity to speak offline a couple times about some of the topics that we're going to cover today. And I think that prospective and current students and even alumni are going to be able to gain a lot from hearing about your journey and your experiences. So thanks again.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So let's start here. You're a native Minnesotan, and from what I understand, as somebody who came to the U from out of state, a lot of people will leave Minnesota for their education and then return to the state to raise their families. So what drew you to the University of Minnesota and the law school in particular?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I grew up in Minnesota, born and raised. In high school, I knew I wanted to major in sports management in college. In some form or fashion. So looking at the colleges with sports management degrees, the University of Minnesota made the most sense for me at that time for financial reasons, but also to stay close with my family and friends. And with the law school, I kind of had a similar thought process with that as well. I knew I wanted to work on the legal side in the sports organization and use my sports management degree to do that. And I knew there were a ton of legal opportunities in the Minneapolis market in the four major sports and a major Division I college program. So that kind of all lined up in terms of going to the law school and checked all my boxes for that.
You mentioned some of the factors that you had considered in making that decision. What advice would you have for an admitted student that's considering Minnesota law and some other law schools?
Yeah. So from my biased opinion, being an alum, I think the University of Minnesota Law School is a great school to go to, not only because it's a top 20, top 25 school, but because there's so many different opportunities in the city or in the state, actually, whether it's the great law firms, these great sports organizations, the amount of Fortune 500 companies that are there, and also big local companies that are there as well. So for either admitted law students or students thinking about going to law school, I think Minnesota offers a lot for students looking into going into the legal profession.
Yeah, I think you touched on something that's a bit of speaks to how much of a hidden gem Minnesota and the Twin Cities are. There's more Fortune 500 companies in the Twin Cities than any other metro area except for New York and New Jersey. And I think that people would be a little bit surprised to hear that. I know that I was when I was making this decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we'll talk about sports in a little bit, but I think just that amount of local organizations within the city, within Minneapolis, St. Paul, the surrounding suburbs, all of those companies have dozens of attorneys. So they're always looking for talent, and they usually pull locally. So that's always helpful.
Yeah. So let's talk about sports law. Obviously, you studied sports management. So was it your intent when you came into law school that you were going to try to work in sports law?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it was always my intent in high school. I think after watching the movie Jerry Maguire, I think originally I wanted to be a sports agent. I want that glamorous life of representing athletes in the NFL or in the NBA or Major League Baseball. But after doing so many informational interviews with different sports agents in college and some in law school as well, kind of realized that that wasn't really going to be my path. But I still wanted to be involved in a sports organization or a sports league in some form or fashion. So that really still led me to the path of working in sports.
And when you were at the law school, were there any student organizations that you were involved in?
Yeah. So in law school, I was a part of the Black Law Student Association, the Criminal Justice League, and also the Sports Law Association throughout my 3 years there.
One of the goals that I've had since I've been at the law school is to help develop our sports law base. It didn't seem right to me that our program wasn't bigger given all of the factors that you mentioned at the outset. How could a stronger sports law association at Minnesota Law help future students pursue a career like yours?
Yeah, definitely. I think a stronger student organization, I think the power in that is really the power of networking. So obviously networking within the group of students that are actually there, participating in the organization or interested in sports or entertainment, just because, you all are going to graduate and become successful lawyers in your own form or fashion in your own industries. So networking early on is extremely important there. But then also networking with other students throughout the country in different law schools. For example, like Marquette and Tulane Law School, I know they have big sports management programs there, or sports law programs, excuse me. And I know they do like certain competitions. So if you're able to have a group of students from the University of Minnesota participate in those competitions, be able to network with not only the students there, but also the attorneys there as well. And something similar to that end, like networking with the attorneys from like my time in law school, whenever I reached out to attorneys, they were extremely happy to talk with me and do informational interviews and tell me like their stories on how they ended up with the Minnesota Vikings or the Minnesota Wild or Minnesota United. So definitely using that opportunity as a student organization to get those attorneys in and speak with the class or the group, I think is extremely beneficial.
Yeah. And so sports law isn't a concentration at Minnesota Law, but is there a particular concentration that the school does offer, like business or labor and employment, that would be better suited for pursuing a career like yours?
Yeah. So in law school, I concentrated in labor and employment. But like the one thing I've learned and continue to learn, like as a sports attorney and just meeting and networking with people in the industry, is that there's not really one path to becoming a sports attorney for working at NASCAR, working with the NFL or NBA. There's no one path. So I would say like my advice is always to take classes that you're interested in. And if that lines up with a business concentration or a labor and employment concentration, then it doesn't hurt to have that. But I wouldn't go into a business concentration with the goal of landing a sports job afterwards, just because there's so many different paths that one person can take.
I think it's really interesting that you had this focus and you didn't necessarily have blinders on, that you were only focused on that one thing. You sort of made yourself well-rounded.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I tried to, at least. I think one key that I did that was extremely helpful was just doing a lot of informational interviews with attorneys in areas that I thought I wanted to be in, or areas I didn't think I wanted to be in, but just really understanding what their day-to-day looked like, whether it's in, a district attorney's office, or if it's in a big law firm or a small law firm, or it's with a local government organization. Doing those informational interviews kind of reaffirmed my goal and passion for the sports industry.
And you paid that forward. That's how we initially met. So I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit more about your legal education at Minnesota Law, and maybe how that gave you an edge in the job trajectory that you were pursuing. How did your legal education at Minnesota Law really help you prepare for the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, well, I think going to a top 20, top 25 law school definitely helps with any prospective jobs that you're looking to get into, no matter if it's, with a local government organization or if it's with a major law firm. I think that definitely helps, especially if you're wanting to practice in the state of Minnesota. I think the University of Minnesota is probably easily the best law school in the state to attend. In terms of like any, success that I've had coming off of that, I think it really kind of falls into three different areas. It's usually like my hard work and effort, obviously, but it's also like the time and effort that people in my life have poured into me over time, whether it's my family, my friends, my fiance, my coworkers, mentors, different attorneys. Like they've helped me get to the point where I'm at to grow personally and professionally. And then a lot, especially in sports, but just in my opinion, a lot in life is just a luck. Right. So there's, especially in sports, so much of the opportunities really comes down to timing. And I think luck really kind of plays a large part in that. And
so you took all of these different opportunities and did great work at them. Was there one particular opportunity or class or job that helped prepare you the most for where you are now?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of classes, like in law school, I'm a transactional lawyer, so I deal with contracts all day. So contract law, contracts and contract drafting, obviously something that I use every single day of my career. In terms of opportunities outside of law school, I think the biggest opportunity for me was with NASCAR after my second year of law school, interning with our public and governmental affairs department. Got me really a foot into the sports industry, but then also with NASCAR in particular.
And I know that there's a lot of pressure put on that summer employment process. I just went through it myself. Did you think that if you hadn't had that opportunity at NASCAR, would it have been impossible for you think, to get into the position where you are now?
I wouldn't say impossible. I think obviously I was extremely lucky, just kind of getting the internship and then, starting with NASCAR early in my career after graduating. But I would say it really, like, kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, like everyone's path is so different. I know attorneys that work in the sports industry that started in-house right after law school, right after they graduated. They were very fortunate. On the flip side, I know attorneys that probably worked in different industries that they weren't really passionate about for 10 or 15 years before they finally got a job in sports. So even if I didn't have the internship to begin with at NASCAR, I think eventually I would have landed there. It's just a matter of when that would be.
Yeah. So in wrapping up just this brief section, if you had to distill all of that into one biggest key piece of advice that you're offering to somebody who's interested in a sports and entertainment law path, what would that be?
Yeah, so I would say obviously like the sports and entertainment industry in particular for attorneys is extremely competitive. So my advice for students is always to take a 360-degree approach when looking at job opportunities, especially within the sports industry. So I think like being in Minnesota is a perfect example. So say if your goal is to work in-house with a professional sports team in Minnesota, there's only, I think there's only like 5 major sports teams in Minnesota, the Big Four and Minnesota United. Out of those, I think the Vikings have 3 in-house attorneys. The Twins have 1. The Timberwolves don't have anyone in-house with the actual Timberwolves organization. Minnesota Wild has 1 attorney. Minnesota United has 1 attorney. So if your goal is that narrow, it's going to really limit your odds of actually getting employment in that. So I say take a 360-degree approach in terms of really understanding the partners that those organizations work with. So whether it's the law firms that they do work with, whether it's the local corporate sponsors that they do work with in Minnesota. So like we talked about earlier, all the Fortune 500 companies, they all have, dozens of attorneys, and they also have partnership agreements, sponsorship agreements with those sports organizations, whether it's Target, with Target Center, Target Field. You have US Bank, you have 3M, you have Cargill, you have Best Buy. So all those organizations have attorneys where you can, kind of go in, learn, and do really good work. And then hopefully, down the line, you can transition that into a sports team. And then also thinking on a larger scale about the national corporate sponsors or vendors like Nike or Adidas or Fanatics. They all have dozens of attorneys, not necessarily dealing with a sports team itself, but still in the sports industry. Same thing working with a league level or at the union level. I know like the NFL and like the NFLPA, I had the chance of interning there briefly. And they have, a dozen lawyers there too. And then also like don't limit yourself to the conventional sports, like the major 4. I would say be open to different opportunities outside. So like me, like NASCAR, I didn't know anything about NASCAR before getting the internship, but I was open to that opportunity. Same thing like now with esports is very big. Twitch is very big. All these social media companies are partnering with sports leagues. So that's extremely big. And I think that's another way to kind of enter the path of going in-house as a sports attorney for either a team or a league. And then also really networking is major in the sports industry, so especially for students. I think the Sports Lawyers Association is a great opportunity to meet and network with people that have jobs that, you might want down the line. I know when I was in my second year, I went to the annual conference. I think it was in Denver at that time. And I met dozens of attorneys that I still either, bounce ideas off of now or stay in contact with. So I think that's extremely important as well. Ultimately, I think the more open you are to opportunities within the sports industry or within the entertainment industry, the more open you are, the more opportunities will open for you.
Yeah, I really like that 360-degree view. That's, speaks quite literally to being well-rounded. So you mentioned your current role at NASCAR, the little bit of background that we've covered. You had a internship there after your second year, but then you left and you came back. So could you tell us a little bit more about the process of ending up in the corporate counsel role that you have now?
Yeah, of course. So I got my internship through the NASCAR Diversity Internship Program, which is entering its 21st year this summer. So back in the summer of 2014, I worked with our public and governmental affairs department. Those are more on the lobbying side of things. So not really in the legal department that I work now. But during that summer, I was not only like working with the attorneys in our public and governmental affairs department, but I was also working and networking with the attorneys in our legal department. So even though we're under the same umbrella, we kind of have two different functions. So with the attorneys in the legal department, I would still network with them after I left. They reached out to me saying like, "Hey, we have a summer internship position. We know you do great work from the governmental affairs department. Like, would you want to come back and be a law clerk?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." So after doing that, there wasn't any full-time jobs opening at NASCAR just because our team is pretty small here. But after that, I got luckily I was looking for other opportunities in the sports industry, and I got an opportunity with the NFL Players Association. So the union representing NFL players in Washington, D.C. that they're based in. So I worked there for about 6 or 7 months in the 2015, 2016 season. And that was a blast. I thought I did great work there, obviously, but like I mentioned earlier, like jobs in sports are extremely competitive. And once like people are in them, they usually don't leave. So at the NFLPA at the time I was there, the youngest attorney there was there for 10 years. So that kind of paints a picture of like no one's really giving up these jobs just because, they're fun, they're great, they're challenging. And it's obviously like pretty cool to work in sports. So after that, I was looking for other jobs back in Minnesota where I'm barred. Ended up getting a job with the League of Minnesota Cities. So a complete 180 from working in sports, working in local government. So I did that for about 2 years before I got a call from our former general counsel here at NASCAR. She gave me a call and let me know that there was a position open if I was interested. And I said, of course. So luckily I came back in May of 2018, been here for almost 3 years now.
Was it ever hard during that time? You're doing good work everywhere you go and people like you and you want to be there and it just doesn't line up at that moment. Is it hard to not get discouraged at that time?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is. But it also like everything, it comes back to like having perspective. So like at that time, it's like I'm like 2 years out of law school. And it's like, I'm really like devastated that I don't have a job in sports. But at the same time, I'm still networking with other attorneys through the Sports Lawyers Association or through other organizations or through Informational Interviews. And they're telling me that it took 10 or 15 years for them to get into sports. So like that really gave me perspective to, not be so hard on myself and to really be patient and continue to do good work, learn how to be the best lawyer that I could be. And then also just kind of be prepared for that opportunity when it does arise.
So in this time that you've been at NASCAR, you mentioned that you've worked on a lot of contracts. I'm wondering, do you have a favorite project that you've worked on, something that you consider to be the most exciting?
Yeah, definitely. So working in the sports industry, at least I find the most exciting projects are the projects that you kind of see start on paper and really come to life. So my top two right now would be working on our next gen race car. So the next gen race car is a new race car that's debuting in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. So in 2022, originally it's supposed to debut this past Daytona 500, but due to COVID, kind of delayed everything back about a year. But this has been a project in making for at least the last 3 or 4 years. And I've had the great opportunity of joining about a year and a half ago and working on the various supplier agreements that go into making the actual car. So then last December, when our competition team was doing testing, they actually came across the street to Daytona International Speedway to test the car. So they gave me and the assistant general counsel a call. We went over to the track. We got to see the car in person, which is it's super cool. and we watched it go around the track a couple times. So that's definitely one of the cooler experience, exciting projects that I've worked on so far. And I think my second one is my second favorite project is probably like a filming agreement that I did with one of our racetracks. So the filming agreement was for the movie Ford versus Ferrari. I'm not too sure if you had a chance to see that, but it's a movie. Everyone should go see it if they get the chance, if they haven't had the chance yet. So it was really cool to see that term sheet come across my desk one day. And then a year later, I'm watching the movie and I can recognize like our racetrack in the movie. And I know like, oh, that's the bridge right there. That's like where they shot the scene at. So that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. Did they let you drive the car?
No, they didn't. They leave that up to the professionals. I did not get to drive the car. I've been on the track and ridden at high speeds, but I haven't driven a car yet.
So about the industry at large, and this could be about NASCAR or it could be about the sports industry. Is there anything that surprised you? You've had a lot of different experiences in the field.
Yeah, I would say as a sports industry, I was extremely surprised by the amount of stakeholders involved in the actual industry. So as a fan, like when you watch a basketball game or football game, like the only thing you're really thinking about are like the teams and the players. Maybe you think about the coaches, but really you're really just thinking about the teams and the players, right? So that's like the league and like the union. But like you also have to think about, at least working in-house, you have to think about all the other stakeholders that go into putting on an event. So you have to think about the team, you have to think about the players or the drivers, you have to think about the sponsors, you have to think about the media partners putting on the game, whether it's ESPN or Fox or CBS, NBC. You also have to think about the vendors working with those to help put on the game. You have to think about the facility that you're at, whether it's owned or it's owned by like the local government or if it's owned by a private company, whether it's a team or a racetrack that owns it. And then you also have to think about like the local government partners, right? So like in this last year has been a very eye-opening experience due to COVID. It's like we had to work very closely with our local government partners in order to make sure that we can get into a state and actually run an event safely. So when making decisions, especially in-house, it's really necessary to take that global view of things and really understand how like decisions really impact all the stakeholders involved in the industry, and not just like the teams and the players.
And so how do you go about keeping that perspective? Are you like making a chart where you're categorizing every group, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, so I think at least at NASCAR, we have different attorneys that specialize in different areas. So when it comes to our media partners, we have attorneys up in our Charlotte office that work extremely close with our media partners. So whenever there's something that could interfere or impact our media partners, I'm always picking their brain, getting their advice, like getting their thoughts on whatever might have an impact on that particular partner. Same thing with different sponsors or different vendors, as well as, we own and operate some of our racetracks that we race at every week, but we also have attorneys here in-house that are the main attorneys for those racetracks. So if there's an issue from a competition side of things where I work at that deals with the racetrack, I'll like just walk to their office and talk through an issue. So it's good to kind of have different perspectives and different attorneys in-house that wear different hats at different times.
That's very interesting how it relates. So you mentioned this past year, and that obviously a lot going on. It was a kind of a nationwide reckoning with racial injustice this past year. And NASCAR really found itself at the center of a couple of those discussions. The organization made the decision to ban the Confederate battle flag. There was the discovery of the pull rope tied in the shape of a noose in Bubba Wallace's Talladega garage. How did those issues impact the sport, and how did they affect your work in particular?
Yeah, so I would, in terms of like the impact that the flag ban had on NASCAR as a sport, I think it was extremely positive. I think we've seen extreme support from our fans in the motorsports industry. And then, we've seen extreme support from observers from the outside that had no interest or, didn't even have NASCAR on their radar. They supported the ban. So ultimately, I think with the Confederate flag ban at NASCAR events, our messaging from the beginning was to make sure that everyone understood that we weren't closing any doors or trying to turn fans away from coming to our events at all. We're actually doing the opposite. We're making clear that we're opening doors for everyone to be a part of the NASCAR family and the NASCAR racing experience, which is a really great experience if you ever have a chance to actually attend an event. In terms of my day-to-day, I personally didn't have any direct involvement either in the ban or the enforcement of the ban. So I think at that time, we just, that first weekend after we banned the flag, we were in Talladega Speedway, which is in Alabama. And we had some of our attorneys actually there on site, mostly because that was the first time we actually had race fans back after COVID. So I think that was like mid-June or July. So we had our general counsel there. We had two other attorneys there as well. And after speaking with them, the amount of fans that showed up at the event with either Confederate flag or Confederate flag like merchandise, it was extremely small. There's like a handful of people. And when they were asked to either remove it or take it down, really got no pushback at all. So from an enforcement standpoint, it's been extremely effective, and hopefully that's a trend that will continue throughout the rest of the time.
And with the pull rope, that was another instance. So was your office or any of the attorneys involved in that, or was that more of law enforcement handling that?
So that was mostly law enforcement. I mean, our competition team, they're actually on site. We do have our competition VP, one of our competition VPs. His name's John Bobo. He's a former attorney, or he is an attorney himself, former prosecutor. So he was actually on site at that time. And then we're also working with either local law enforcement and eventually the FBI came in as well. But fortunately and unfortunately, that situation was above my pay grade. So it was really handled. Any legal issues related to that were handled by our general counsel and our chief legal officer at the time as well.
And you did touch on COVID a little bit. I wanted to mention NASCAR was one of the first sports to be able to get fans back. What was the process behind that? And was that something that you were particularly proud of, that you were able to do it in a safe way? Yeah, definitely. And I think, especially as it relates to COVID, just like the more information that we know about COVID and the virus and how it's transmitted, I mean, obviously with NASCAR being an outdoor sport, that helps us immensely. So it not only helps us with our drivers who are participating in, different cars, so they're socially distanced, our pit crew who, have helmets on and fire suits, so they're protected with their own, PPE before anyone knew what PPE was. So from there, we actually had inherent competitive advantages to going back. Bringing back fans was a tough thing, but it was, obviously a proud thing that we're proud of, that we're able to do safely with social distancing. I'm not too sure if you've ever been to a NASCAR race,
or if anyone's in the audience, but our facilities are huge. So at an event like Daytona or Talladega, it's a super speedway. And I think in Daytona in particular, it's large enough that it can fit all of the other arenas and stadiums of professional teams inside of Daytona International Speedway. So that's another inherent competitive advantage that we had, just the size. So we were able to have fans back, like in social distance throughout the entire grandstands. And plus the virus, it's not as transmittable outdoors versus indoors in close quarters. So with all of those inherent competitive advantages, plus working closely with our public and governmental affairs and the local government, we're extremely proud to have fans and continue to ramp up to different levels of fans. And hopefully sometime this year, we'll be able to have a sellout crowd and kind of go back to normal like 2019.
Yeah, there's nothing like hearing that roar of the crowd. I've been missing it in all the sports. And as for the different stadiums fitting inside, I remember a few years ago at Bristol, they did the Virginia Tech Tennessee football game, which I think that's awesome when you get a little crossover like that.
Yeah, it is.
So I wanted to circle back to your ongoing relationship with the law school. Obviously, we're also happy that you were able to do this event. And we mentioned paying it forward a little bit. Did you have mentors in law school, and how did you go about finding them?
Yeah, no, I definitely had mentors in law school. I think me personally, being born and raised in Minnesota, I had mentors already that really weren't in the legal industry that really helped me throughout my law school tenure and continue to this day to help me out. But many of the mentors that I've met in the legal industry have come from previous roles that I had. So either with the NFLPA and NASCAR in particular, I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing and extremely smart and talented attorneys. So anytime I can get their advice on a situation, I'm always like jumping at that opportunity to kind of pick their brain and just kind of talk about either different legal issues or kind of like our career paths.
And you mentioned some of the people from Minnesota law who are currently working in the sports industry, or, they're currently working in different industries. Do you still keep in touch with a lot of your classmates and people that you overlapped with at the school?
Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely keep in touch, probably not as often as I should or definitely want to, especially like me being here based in Daytona Beach, Florida, and my classmates still, or a lot of them still in Minnesota. But I definitely reach out, especially one of my colleagues or former students that I overlapped with. She works for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I always kind of bounce ideas off of, or we'll bounce ideas off of every few months here. So.
And as for building connections, I know that a major tool that you talked about with networking is informational interviews, and the Career Center does a great job at teaching us how to go about doing that. Was there anything else that you did which really helped you start to build your sports law network?
Yeah, definitely. I think, so in law school, I was like the vice president and president of the Sports Law Association. So being able to be in that role and to reach out to attorneys with the Vikings or with the Minnesota United at the time, or different attorneys working at law firms but that worked with sports organizations. I think that was really helpful for me in terms of building that. I think in general, I think all attorneys really love talking to law students and giving back as much as possible, especially when there's a connection with that student, whether it's with a student organization that they participated in, or whether it's specific to a law school. So I definitely encourage all students to take advantage of that as much as possible.
Absolutely. And the last question that I have for you is what's next for you? Do you have anything that you're really looking forward to this year?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me personally, I'm just looking at continuing to really grow in my role here at NASCAR and really learn as much as possible, both personally and professionally. In terms of our sport, like there's a lot of cool projects that we're working on that will, come down the line in the next 2 or 3 years. One I mentioned earlier that's starting next year is the next gen race car. So I'm extremely excited to see the fruits of our labor go on tour nationally next year. So hopefully just me, I'm just really just kind of focused on continuing to grow in my career and grow here at NASCAR.
That's great. Thank you, Hakeem.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both. So at this time, we've reached the audience Q&A portion of our program. So attendees, please feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A chat function. And while we wait for questions to come in, remember to check the chat as well for a link to the Student Org Sports Law podcast, Conduct Detrimental, and for the profiles on our panelists. Those links will be there in your chat function. So while we get some questions to come in, I'd like to ask Taryn, could you tell us a little bit more about your Minnesota law experience as a 2L now, maybe where you've worked, and if you and Hakeem have shared any similar experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also really happy to serve in the role of Vice President of the Sports Law Association right now. So that's definitely something that Hakeem and I had in common. Another thing is that I worked in sports beforehand. I went to get my graduate degree in business with the intention of working in professional baseball, and that ended up happening. And so this, I saw law school as a way to continue to develop skills that would be valuable, whether they be for a professional team or an organization or even anything sports adjacent. So this summer, I'm going to be working at a firm in Minneapolis, Frederickson and Byron, which they have a sports area, which I'm really excited about. And there's some great people over there. And I'm excited to continue learning how to be a really good lawyer. That's something that I really got from Hakeem's conversation today, is that the importance of doing good work and learning how to be the best attorney that you can possibly be. As for my reasoning for coming to the University of Minnesota. So I, with some friends from high school, we like to go to the Final Four. So I've been to the last couple of Final Fours with them. And in 2019, it was in Minneapolis at US Bank Stadium where the Vikings play. And I had applied to Minnesota Law School because, it's obviously a great school. And I was considering there or going somewhere on the East Coast where I'm from. And I visited the school, and everybody seemed just very happy in the admissions department. And it was a really enjoyable tour to go on. And it was better than the tours that I had been on at other schools. But the biggest difference to me was, at some of the other schools, I had tried to get professors who taught sports law on the phone just to talk for like 10, 15 minutes, kind of get a better idea of the program and what I might be able to offer and what I might be able to learn. And it was just like pulling teeth. So I was assigned Professor Mitch Zamoff, who teaches Civ Pro and evidence and a bunch of other classes at the law school. And he was assigned to recruit me. And he spent nearly an hour on the phone with me the Sunday in between the Saturday Final Four games and the Monday championship, talking to me about everything and really made the decision easy for me. And so I think that is the rule and not the exception, that there are great professors and great people at the University of Minnesota that are willing to take that time and communicate with you and help you grow into a better person. So definitely appreciate Professor Zamoff and all of the people at the University of Minnesota. And a special shout out to my career counselor, Wendy Griak. She helped me so much this past 2 years in getting the job that I'm really excited about. So I love the University of Minnesota. I'm so excited that you asked me to be a part of this today.
We're so glad you're here. So one of the themes I'm hearing is this idea about having conversations with people that are in career roles that you admire or that you're trying to explore. We call these conversations informational interviews. So Hakeem, I'm curious if you have any best practices or pieces of advice for students who are going to conduct informational interviews and how they can do so effectively.
Yeah, I would say do your research. So making sure that you kind of know like what the attorney that you want to reach out to actually does. If there's articles on them, like read up. Because there's like so much on the internet now, don't ask really like basic questions. Ask questions that are really going to help you and serve you. Especially if someone's willing to spend 20, 30, 60 minutes of their time, really like dive deep. Don't ask surface level questions. Like, what school you went to or things that's like commonly or easily accessible. I would also just say, don't be discouraged if you don't get a response right away. So making sure that you follow up. It's kind of like a fine line between like following up a lot and like harassment, right? So so I would like, and sometimes it's kind of like touch and feel with that in terms of like how to know when to follow up with someone or when that person might just be busy at that time and just not really have the capacity to like follow up or do an informational interview. So I think those are my two main keys of advice.
Great advice. So you kind of mentioned this, but in addition to doing the research online, what industry news or publications or other online resources do you recommend students interested in sports and entertainment law tap into or keep an eye on?
Yeah, so I would say the Sports Lawyers Association is definitely number one. And then for me, in terms of just like business or, like really like we have like a saying here at NASCAR, like business issues are legal issues and legal issues are business issues. So there's not really like outside of like the Sports Lawyers Association, I don't think there's really too many lawyer specific articles or topics or websites you can go to. But I definitely like recommend going to like Sportico, which is a like sports business site that just launched earlier in the pandemic. Front Office Sports is another great one. I mean, obviously you can go to like ESPN or like the Ringer, different like websites like that to kind of really get a deep dive in terms of like what's actually going on in the industry. Sports Business Journal is another one. I think if you're a student and you have a student membership through the Sports Lawyers Association, you get a free membership to the Sports Business Journal. And the Sports Business Journal, I read every day or catch up on the weekends just because there's so much on the business side of sports that really impact legal issues as well.
And so Hakeem, when you suggested that to me on the first call that we had, I signed up for that. And so they send a really great digest email every day. So you can not only learn about the major headlines, but they're all attuned to sports business. So it's perfect. And Sportico is great. There's a lot of articles on there. Michael McCann is a great author. He talks about basically issues at the intersection of sports and law and business also. And as far as podcasts go, if you want to listen to like the Sports Business Journal does the Morning Buzzcast with Abe Madcore, that's really great, especially during the early days of the pandemic when, information is kind of changing all the time. You're like, what is going on? That was really helpful to me to know what was going on and where things were headed. So those are all really great resources.
Agreed. Okay, we have an audience question here. How do you think, Hakeem, your prior position with the Minnesota League of Cities informed your job performance with NASCAR now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think with the League of Minnesota Cities, I did some labor and employment work there, which was very helpful for my experience with the law school. But also, I see some labor and employment issues here at NASCAR as well. My job with the League of Minnesota Cities was really researching different laws and advising city attorneys, city council members, different like residents of cities on what the actual law is. So gaining that research background actually helps me a lot when I'm trying to research different legal issues here at NASCAR, especially when, I'm trying to figure out an issue and I don't want to go to outside counsel with a very open-ended question because budgetary reasons. I don't want to run up our budget on a very wide open issue. So having that background on researching very specific laws and legal issues definitely helps me now to this day.
Great. Okay, we'll give another minute if anyone from the audience wants to submit another question. And if not, we can go ahead and sign off early. But thank you very much again to our panelists and for everyone who attended today. Again, there will be a link to the recording that you will receive in email after today's session. So thank you very much again. Have a great day. And for those in Minnesota, stay warm.